I do like the shutter. It's pretty nice. I've actually been wanting to review this camera for quite some time, and this isn't going to be really a review. It's going to be more like my experience. So I'm going to kind of do this like side by side Fujifilm-ish because I feel like so many people out there want to upgrade to this camera or switch from Nikon, this camera, to Fujifilm. There are lots of questions out there, and hopefully this will answer some of them. I'm borrowing this camera from my friend Matthew Morse. He will be showing in the video pretty soon, talking about his thoughts on this camera as well, because I wanted you to hear it from the owner also, the things that he thinks about it that are important to consumers, the people that are going to be buying them. I will say that without the grip on this camera, it feels a lot cheaper. So I would definitely recommend getting this. Otherwise, it's really hard to hold on to. Honestly, it's so thin and dainty that you have to have the grip, in my opinion. And I'm sure there's people that have this camera that will say the same thing in the comments below. The dials are made of brass and they are beautiful, and I feel like they are just meant to last forever. They look great and they feel great, and the tactility is nice, and yeah, all the buttons are great. Exposure compensation. It's a very well built camera on the top. It's when you start getting to the bottom when everything turns to plastic. I mean, there's magnesium in here as well, but it's just kind of strange how it's just like a mixture of all kinds of things, which I mean is normal, but I feel like they could have made it a little bit less cheap. Although the price of this camera is understandable to why they had to cut back on a few materials in order to keep the cost low. And honestly, for the price of this camera, you're getting a lot. There are so many functions in this camera that I couldn't even get started with, or I would probably never use them because I'm photo first, and what I need is a good photography camera, and this is a good photography camera. So whenever you switch over to aperture priority, for some reason it overrides the shutter speed, but it does not override the ISO. The shutter speed can be anywhere and it will override it. The ISO dial has to be on custom or C, and then you have to go into the menu and tell it that you want it to be automatic ISO. So it doesn't do it automatically. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I hate that about this camera. Not that I'll be using aperture priority. It's just a weird, like, why didn't you just make it automatic and override, just like the shutter? And Matthew says the same thing. He dealt with it and he ran into the same issue. You can get there, it just takes a little bit longer, and I feel like that extra step is just kind of annoying and a little bit lazy. I feel like they just kind of threw it together a little bit. Another thing that I'm not too excited about with this camera is the lens options for the retro styling. We have two. We have a 40mm f2, a 28 2.8. They're not great lenses. These are older lenses that they just rehoused and threw them on these cameras. And it just feels like everything was just thrown together way too fast, in my opinion. And obviously the craze from Instagram and TikTok and everything was going on about the Fujifilm cameras, and I feel like Nikon was like, hey, let's get this cash grab, as Matthew said, and let's make some money really quick, you know. So let's make a retro camera, rehouse some lenses that we already have, and boom, here we go. And they did a great job. That's exactly what they did. They made a lot of money doing this. So I just think that the lenses kind of suck that you can get with it, and there's only two. I feel like they should release more lenses with aperture rings, or just let Sigma be part of the lineup. Just let them into the Z mount so you can have better lenses than this, because this is what pushes me away, because I'm not going to put a lens that doesn't look retro on a retro camera. It just looks odd. Like Fujifilm did it right. All of their lenses look retro. They all have an aperture ring. The optics are incredible, and the bodies are built well, and they can put aperture. You can put automatic on every single function. The whole entire exposure triangle, you can put A on all of them and turn the whole thing automatic. It's so simple. Nikon could learn from Fujifilm. Obviously the design of this was great. It looks like the F3, and I'm pretty sure the F3 designer actually helped design this. That's really all I have bad to say about this camera, and I really didn't mean to say anything bad about it. I mean, those are just my honest opinions. Now, what I will say is that the sensor in this thing is beautiful. I will be hated in the comments by this, but I believe it is better than Fujifilm. I believe it is better than Sony, and it's very close to Canon, as what I would say, because I love how natural Canon's photos are, especially from the 5D Mark III. They look very true to life, but these are on another level. I think you could get away in the certain conditions shooting and not editing, because straight out of camera they look incredible just from raw images, no edits. It's nuts. So this has pushed me to want to switch to Nikon next year because of this sensor. Although Fujifilm of course has the recipes and everything that everybody loves, but you can't do anything with the recipes for RAW. And those photos to me aren't very pleasing in RAW, and neither is Sony's, and the newer Canons aren't that great in my opinion either. But the Nikon looks really, really good, and it's super impressive. Another thing is the autofocus is way more reliable than Fujifilm. I know that they just released a new update, but that doesn't tell me anything. I have experienced firsthand how bad Fujifilm's autofocus is. Then I had to leave Fujifilm because it was so unreliable. This is a lot more reliable. It's not Sony reliable, nothing is, but it is more reliable than the Fujifilm cameras that I have used in the past. I would say if you're a Fujifilm owner and you're interested in the Nikon, I would definitely rent one and see how it makes you feel. The dials are backwards from everything, and the mount is backwards as well, so it kind of takes a second to get used to, but it's nothing that serious. I do believe that you would have fun with this. I would definitely try to adapt other lenses other than these, but they do work, and they are decent. They're not great by any means. The lenses are just, they're alright, you know. I would probably buy this camera over Fujifilm based off of the autofocus and the sensor. I feel like Fujifilm has better lenses as far as the retro styling goes. But now that you can adapt Sony E-mount lenses to this, I would just buy a Sigma lens and put it on here. Because they're small, compact aperture ring. I don't know. I don't shoot video. I didn't shoot any video on this. I've heard good things, but I just didn't want to. I wanted this to be photo first, and that's what I feel like this camera was actually made for, although it does have a lot of great specs that I didn't even get to try out because I didn't need to. I'm a photographer. I work, at a normal pace. What do you think? They're just going to keep making the cheaper lenses like they already are?
I do. I think they're going to rehouse more of their lenses into that like SE format that they call it, which just looks like a vintage lens. And it makes me mad too, like they didn't do an aperture ring, but they put a fake aperture ring on it, which is even worse. The little silver.
Oh, yeah.
It's like I would have just rather that been black. And not because I don't mind having silver on my cameras. I mean, this is my M10 and it's a silver lens on a black camera, which I love. Yeah. But having like a fake aperture ring is even worse than having no aperture ring. It's like it's like they're saying, we know you want an aperture ring. Yeah. Not only are we not going to give it to you, we're going to just put a placeholder there that doesn't do anything. It almost feels like they sort of like crippled the camera just a little bit so that like their professionals wouldn't jump from like the Z8 or the Z6 III to the ZF. Sometimes I like form over function, and I think that's like the best way to describe the ZF. Is that it's form over function, but like it's too much form over function. Like it's like form over function in a way that it really does get in the way of like using it.
Anyways, that's my thoughts on the ZF. Beautiful camera, well done for the most part. They need to come out with a second one with a better grip and some lenses that actually have aperture rings. I think it would be incredible. Maybe more megapixels in the sensor. I'm sure a lot of people would appreciate that. I hope you guys enjoy this video, and until next time, peace.